Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, October 14th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Shelter in place. That is the urgent order being given at a local university after a rash of new coronavirus cases. Students have tested positive in 4 residence halls at Point Loma Nazarene. KPBS reporter John Carroll looks at what's being done to stop the spread.
This campus is probably what comes to mind when you think of a COVID outbreak at a university. But now it's this serene setting, Point Loma Nazarene University.
It's definitely a scary feeling.
Senior Shreya Asher is a resident advisor in the on-campus student apartments. She says there are no COVID cases in her building. The school put out this notice late yesterday alerting students and faculty of an outbreak of COVID-19. 12 students were identified as having COVID, but 66 are now in quarantine, told to shelter in place in their dorms, to not leave their respective floors until cleared by the school's wellness center. Today, the school announced more cases. PLNU now has 19 active cases spread over 4 dorms, Classen, Hendricks, Young, and Nice halls. No cases so far among faculty or staff. The school is awaiting results from 98 tests. There have been 29 positive test results since August 1st.
I kind of have just been waiting for that email to come. Like, I kind of anticipated it ever since there was a move-in of students on campus. I kind of expected that the numbers would increase.
Along with the email about the uptick in cases, the school also announced a tightening of its policy on masks. A school spokesman told me up until now, as long as students were physically distancing outside, they weren't being too strict about mask wearing. Not anymore. Students must now wear masks at all times, except in their dorm rooms or while eating or exercising.
I think that the school has done a good job of emphasizing the severity of the virus and how important it is for us to, if we want to maintain our community that we love so much and being part of Point Loma, we have to abide by these safety rules.
Senior Michaela Renner says her fellow students were already doing a good job of wearing masks before the school's new stricter rule.
And I'm glad that we tightened those restrictions, and I think a lot of my friends that I've spoken to that live on campus are glad that the university is doing so much to keep them safe and remind everyone across the board that this is important.
We don't know what the future holds, but I do believe that something beautiful is going to come out of all of this, regardless of if that's in a year or if that's in a few months or whenever.
A hope that no doubt stretches far beyond the confines of Point Loma Nazarene University. John Carroll, KPBS News.
First comes Halloween, then Thanksgiving, and hopefully not a spike in coronavirus cases. That's the concern raised by the CDC director today. But first, here in San Diego County, 303 new cases and 4 more deaths were announced. And that brings our total to more than 51,000 cases and 844 deaths. As KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento tells us, we still need to do more to ease virus-related restrictions.
No new restrictions for San Diego County. The region's rate of new coronavirus cases keeps it yet again in the state's second most restrictive phase of reopening. Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says it's not all good news.
But the bad news is it's not getting better.
County businesses have been stuck running at limited capacity with few signs that'll change soon. The Board of Supervisors recently approved more funds for struggling companies and nonprofits, but the region's adjusted COVID case rate is just barely below a level that would trigger closures.
But we are living on the edge and the precipice of going into that higher tier every single week.
He says improving that comes down to the public following the county's public health orders.
While we know the overwhelming majority of San Diegans are doing everything right, They've got in a routine about wearing their mask. They're avoiding large indoor settings. They're physically distancing people they don't live with. They're washing their hands. The reality is we'd like to see our case counts descending.
But at the same time, the state recently okayed small outdoor gatherings, and interactions during upcoming trick-or-treating are a concern. Plus, more school districts are planning to reopen. And Supervisor Greg Cox says flu season could put added pressure on hospitals.
That will be critical this year, more so than ever, to avoid a double whammy from the flu and COVID cases.
He encouraged San Diegans to get their flu vaccines. Free flu shots are available, and details can be found at 211 San Diego. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
36 states are seeing a resurgence of coronavirus cases, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says small household gatherings are helping to drive it. CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield said during a call with the nation's governors today that he's particularly concerned with Thanksgiving coming up. According to Johns Hopkins University, the 7-day average of new daily cases surpassed 51,000 yesterday. It's the first time in more than 2 months that the figure was above 50,000. The Marines have fired the commander of the unit involved in a deadly assault vehicle accident over the summer. 8 Marines and 1 sailor were killed. More now from KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh.
The accident happened July 30th during an exercise off the coast of San Clemente Island. The investigation into why the armored landing craft sank has not finished, but the Marines fired Lieutenant Colonel Michael J. Regner, who was in charge of the battalion landing team, part of the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. A Defense Department video shows Regner speaking at a memorial ceremony in August at Camp Pendleton for the 9 troops who died.
We need that courage to face our future challenges. And we take comfort to know that that path of courage is lit by the flame that each one of these heroes has lit in our heart.
The commander of 1st Expeditionary Force, Lieutenant General Kirsten Heckel, relieved Regner, citing a loss of trust and confidence in his ability. Relieving Regner is the first sign that the investigators are getting close to determining why the AAV sank abruptly surrounded by other craft. In the meantime, the Marines are suspending all water operations involving the armored personnel carrier. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
In a 3-2 decision, the La Mesa City Council voted to create a new police oversight board and contract a police auditor to investigate serious incidents and complaints against officers. The board and auditor will also review and make recommendations on police department policies, procedures, and practices. The mayor will appoint members of the board, which will be made up of 11 volunteers. The full council will then vote to confirm each member. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled the census count must come to an immediate close. As KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us, local advocates were hoping just a few more days would help them avoid a massive undercount and billions of dollars lost in federal support.
For months, local census organizers have been racing against the clock to make sure everyone gets counted in this year's census. Especially hard to count populations like undocumented immigrants and the homeless. They thought they had until October 31st, but now they're out of time. They're fearful that the census undercount from 10 years ago, which held back millions in funding from these communities, will pale in comparison to this year's possible undercount.
When you're actually talking in terms of human beings, we're way, way undercounted to the order that we were 10 years ago for the hard to count.
Enumerators sent by the federal government to go door to door to check on families that had not yet responded to the census only had a few weeks to do their work, and many were sent home early. But the government says almost all households have now been counted.
In a day, we found 110 families that had not been counted. Even after all this, 110 families showed up.
By law, the census must be completed by the end of the year. And there's no real way to correct the figures once they're finalized, even with a new president or Senate. Calderon says this means that for the next 10 years, neighborhoods like City Heights, and especially its unhoused and undocumented residents, will be living with the results of a botched count. And with each person counted averaging between $1,000 and $2,000 of direct federal support to the district, the numbers are going to add up.
So 10 people, it's 20,000 in a year. Multiply that times 10. So it is literally millions and millions of dollars.
The Census Bureau says it will continue to process online census responses through the end of Thursday night. Max Rivlin-Adler, KPBS News.
Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett testified on Capitol Hill for a third day. Republicans hope to wind the hearing process down this week, then move to a committee vote. Karen Kaifa has details.
During a second full day of questions, each of the 22 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee has 20 minutes to get answers from Amy Coney Barrett. Republicans eager to move the confirmation process along.
Above all, it's clear that you understand the appropriate role of a judge, just what we're looking for, at least on this side of the aisle.
Making today's session less about questions for Senate Republicans and more about praise for the nominee.
So this hearing to me is an opportunity to not punch through a glass ceiling, but a reinforced concrete barrier around conservative women. You're going to shatter that barrier.
For a second day, Democrats pressed Judge Barrett for answers on the Affordable Care Act at the center of a challenge to be argued before the court on November 10th.
Do you ever write or speak out in defense of the ACA, whether as a academic or as a member of the judiciary? That's a pretty simple question. It could be answered yes or no.
No, I've never had occasion to speak on a policy question.
And so every time you've weighed in on it, you said the law is unconstitutional.
After today's questioning, the committee plans to hear from outside witnesses tomorrow, setting the table to vote on the nomination next week and send it to the full Senate for a pre-election day vote. In Washington, I'm Karen Kaifa.
5 candidates are on the ballot for 3 seats on the San Diego Unified School Board. KPBS education reporter Joe Hong looks at how they hope to navigate the state's second largest school district through unprecedented times.
Being a school board member is a difficult job even in the best of times. The responsibilities include managing a Byzantine budget, listening to disgruntled parents, and making decisions that have far-reaching consequences for the lives of students. Now we have a global pandemic that has upended nearly every aspect of public education and a reckoning over racial justice that has forced educators to address the uncomfortable question of who gets left behind in our classrooms. It's against this backdrop that 6 candidates are vying for 3 seats on the San Diego Unified School Board, which serves 100,000 students. In Subdistrict A, which covers Claremont, Mira Mesa, and University City, 2 candidates are competing to replace current board president John Lee Evans, who isn't seeking re-election. Both of the candidates agreed the district needs to rely on public health experts rather than rushing to reopening schools. Sabrina Bazo is a public health educator and a longtime parent volunteer in the district. During the past decade, she served for 6 years as the Mira Mesa High School Foundation president. She hopes to expand a peer tutoring program that she helped start at Mira Mesa High.
Now we're up to about over 30 tutors, I think, and we've probably reached about 50 families or so, and we're continuing that program. So it's a good example of something that we could replicate in other parts of the district that's totally free of charge. We're trying to keep it volunteer, and we're trying to really identify those students that need those resources the most.
Bazo's opponent is Crystal Troll, a professor of nonprofit management. She said her experience consulting for nonprofits makes her uniquely qualified to bring accountability and transparency to the district. She said she's been disappointed by the lack of open communication between the district and parents.
They've just been making a lot of decisions and having discussions behind closed doors. They tell us little things here and there, but I think that the parent engagement piece has really suffered in terms of communicating.
In Subdistrict E, which covers neighborhoods in southeast San Diego, Luana Richmond is challenging incumbent Sharon Whitehurst Payne. This subdistrict serves a disproportionate number of low-income students and students of color. Richmond has a doctorate in educational leadership and currently works as an organizational development manager at UC San Diego. She said her experience in the foster care system and as a teen mom has given her a first-hand understanding of the challenges facing the district's most vulnerable students.
In times like this, when you have enormous disruption in any type of system, it's an opportunity for exponential growth and progress because you learn things that you never would have found out in such a condensed and short period of time, because you don't have any choice but to learn, unless you choose not to.
Whitehurst Payne, who's trying for a second term, says as a board member she's made sure the district acted swiftly to distribute food and devices when schools first shut down.
We wanted to get learning devices out to all children because we know our schools and we know that in some communities We have a digital divide.
Apart from COVID relief efforts, Whitehurst Payne said her primary achievement has been improving training for special education teachers.
I have made a difference on this board. I've been able to identify some of the critical issues that would impact District E, African Americans, Latinos, and just across the board.
Richard Barrera is running for re-election to represent Subdistrict D, which serves downtown San Diego as well as the neighborhoods of North Park, Barrio Logan, and City Heights. A labor rights and community advocate, he's currently the board vice president and has served since 2008, running unopposed in both 2012 and 2016. He said the work he's done helped prepare the district for COVID-19.
Our district has become a much stronger district with much better outcomes for students, much more equitable outcomes for students. And I think we're much clearer about what we need to do going forward.
Barrera is challenged by Miramar College professor and longtime school counselor Camille Harris, who ran against him in the primary as a write-in candidate. She said the COVID-19 crisis in education gives leaders an opportunity to steer the district in a new direction.
These kiddos are suffering. Parents are suffering. Parents who have to work from home and trying. I have, people that I know who are two-parent families, and they have to teach their students and monitor them, and they're in charge of their education.
Joe Hong, KPBS News.
The race for San Diego City Council District 7 is one of just 2 council races with a Democrat and Republican facing off. And KPBS reporter Claire Tregesser tells us the candidates have very different stances on key issues.
Noli Zosa, a Republican, is a co-founder of the restaurant chain Dirty Birds. His business experience informs his views on how the county responded to the COVID pandemic. He was frustrated as a restaurant owner that when the pandemic first hit, the county allowed big box stores such as Walmart to stay open, but forced businesses like his to close.
We could have operated those same guidelines, and we are operating now. But during those critical 2-3 months where we were shut down completely, a lot of small businesses folded, unfortunately, permanently.
Zosa's Democratic opponent, Raul Campillo, sees things quite differently. The deputy city attorney says the county's response to COVID has not been strict enough.
When new policies come in place, regardless of what area of life they are, if they aren't enforced early, the public is going to not take it seriously. The county should have made sure that they were going to cite people who were violating the health orders early on. And I'm not talking drastic, punitive measures, simply citations where people knew I am going to be paying a small fine if I violate this.
The ongoing pandemic will likely force the city council to make further budget cuts in the 2021 fiscal year. Campillo says if elected, he would want to cut spending by eliminating outside contractors.
We shouldn't be sending to outside firms and instead should be bringing in an engineer or surveyor to work for the city and be able to plan projects in-house.
Zosa would cut
The money that Sandag and the city is spending on protected bike lanes, Sandag is spending $279 million on, which that money should be going to fixing our streets and our roads.
The outcome of the race could impact the balance of power on the city council. If Campillo replaces the Republican Scott Sherman, it would mean Democrats pick up an additional seat. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
And if you register to vote but don't get your mail-in ballot on time, there are other options for you. There are 235 SuperPoll sites across the county that will be open for 4 days for in-person voting leading up to Election Day on November 3rd. And right now, you can go to the San Diego County Registrar of Voters office to cast a ballot in person. County Registrar Michael Vu says he and his team have focused on safety.
The amount of personal protective equipment that we have purchased is, for the most part, pretty overwhelming. We've got 700,000 gloves that we have purchased. We've got 300,000 masks that we have purchased. We've got tens of thousands of sanitizing wipes, tubs of those.
Residents with mail-in ballots can return those by the post office, postal service, or drop them off at the county's 126 drop-off sites, which include libraries, county offices, and YMCAs. And don't forget to check out our KPBS Voter Guide. The online resource is customizable to the races on your ballot with candidate statements and our recent reports. You can find the link on our homepage at kpbs.org. It is the largest coral reef on Earth, but researchers say Australia's Great Barrier Reef has lost half of its coral population in the last 3 decades. Reef disturbance is thought to primarily be driven by climate change. These reefs support more than a quarter of all marine life and are home to more than 1,500 species of fish over 133,000 square miles.
Our heat wave continues for a couple more days. Temperatures will stay well above average. Winds will start to increase Thursday night and Friday. Get a little bit of a Santa Ana. Could see some winds gusting over 40 miles an hour. That certainly will not help out the fire risk. Some cooling, though, is on the way. Coming this weekend, you'll notice it even more so on Sunday. So there's a little relief down there at the end of the tunnel. A little bit of light there. For now, though, we continue with our heat advisory. So, again, common sense necessary here. Slow down, reduce your levels of activity, hydrate, and try and stay in the air conditioning. Put off that exercise to the cooler parts of the day and any type of yard work you might want to be doing. Temperatures tonight dipped down to the mid-50s Oceanside. San Diego 65. Escondido's 59 and El Cajon 63. Borrego Springs a mild 69. Campo dips down to about 50. For tomorrow, it's sunny and it's hot. Fire danger increases, continue dry, and some places will be close to records. As we look at the fire potential, still a little bit higher just to our north, but it should be on the increase here Thursday night and Friday as our winds do pick up out of a northeasterly direction. So that could be a little bit of an added problem. Look at the temperatures tomorrow. Boy, it's hot right to the beaches here. You know, temperatures in our area averaging the low 70s. Interior valleys here averaging the low 80s. Deserts we're averaging around 90 this time of year. So we're way above average. And as we take a look at Friday, rain is absent, continued hot and dry. Here's our extended forecast. Some relief coming. See it there Sunday into Monday. Temperatures gradually coming down here towards the weekend in the interior sections. Some clouds will be with us too. And as we take you to the mountains, still looking at above average temperatures the next couple of days. Some weekend cooling is coming. And in the deserts, temperatures staying pretty high here, gradually coming down. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
From UC San Diego graduate to NASA astronaut, Kate Rubins arrived aboard the International Space Station today. She joins 2 Russian cosmonauts to conduct research for the next 6 months. This marks Rubins' second space flight since 2016, where she became the first person to sequence DNA in space. NASA says research conducted in microgravity will help prepare for longer missions to the Moon, to Mars, as well as help make improvements here on Earth. A new documentary is now playing at the newly reopened landmark Hillcrest Cinemas. It's called Time, and KPBS film critic Beth Accomando has this review.
Garrett Bradley wants her documentary Time to encourage people to imagine a more just and compassionate future. The way she tries to achieve this is through the story of Fox and Rob Rich, a couple who committed a robbery out of desperation. Fox served 3.5 years, but Rob was sentenced to 60. When Fox was released, she dedicated her life to getting her husband out of prison.
Hello. Did you get any word from over at the big house today? Anything yet? Nothing yet? No. Okay. You got a chance to call today? I have not. No? Okay. Man, these people have no respect for other human beings' lives. No matter how sane or how understanding you try to be, it just will make you lose your absolute mind. Success is the best revenge. Success is the best revenge.
Time wants us to understand that injustice is not just about innocent people wrongfully imprisoned, but also guilty people whose punishments do not fit their crimes. Time states its case with great humanity and a stunning sense of artistry. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the partisan divide is on display as senators again question Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's a recap of today's top stories. Point Loma Nazarene University says 19 of its students have now tested positive for coronavirus. They're part of a group of 66 students now in quarantine. The school has now tightened up its mask policy. Students must now wear facial coverings unless they're in their dorm room or are eating or exercising. Today, San Diego County announced 303 new coronavirus cases and 4 more deaths. That brings our totals to more than 51,000 cases and 844 deaths. The CDC director says case spikes in other states have been driven by small gatherings. He is especially concerned about Thanksgiving and people moving in gatherings indoors as it starts to get colder. And the commanding officer involved in a training accident that killed 9 young servicemen near San Clemente Island has been relieved from duty. The Marine Corps says Lieutenant Colonel Michael Regner was removed from his post due to a loss in trust and confidence in his ability to command. The amphibious vehicle carrying the Camp Pendleton-based personnel sunk during a training mission in July. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation. Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.